Hi, and welcome to Council's Talking Bayside Tuesday webinar on healthy relationships as we get older. This is an information session we've organised in recognition of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which is tomorrow. I'm Carly McLennan. I'm the Positive Ageing Specialist at Bayside Council, and I'll be your host for today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I work, the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. The people of the Eora Nation, their spirit and ancestors, will always remain with our waterways and the land, our Mother Earth. I would also like to extend that respect to elders, past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal people joining us today. All right, so today we are joined by Renee Castanius from the Ageing and Disability Commission, Fiona Tate from Relationships Australia, and Jared Dunlop and Jill McDonald from Seniors Rights Service. Before we begin, I will ask you to please hold any questions until the end of each presentation. You will be able to unmute yourself to do this, and you can also put your questions in the chat at any time, and we will address them at the end of each presentation. I should also let you know that this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be posted to Council's YouTube channel for anyone who was not able to make it today. The question and answer sections of the webinar will not be included in this recording. All right, so now I will hand over to Renee. Hi, Renee. Welcome. Are you ready to share your screen and unmute yourself as well? Sorry about that.
All good. Thank you, and hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Renee and I'm from a very new agency called the New South Wales Ageing and Disability Commission. And really what I want to do today is share with you why we exist and why you would possibly contact us. We are dealing with a topic area that isn't nice and isn't great, but unfortunately issues of abuse and neglect do exist within our community. Really, we want to get across today that it is okay to reach out and get help and information. It is okay that if you are concerned about the well-being and the welfare of somebody that you know, that there are services that can help you, that you can be anonymous when you reach out to these services. And really what we're trying to do is support you to promote the right to live in safety. The Ageing and Disability Commission is a very new New South Wales government agency. So we are part of the New South Wales government structure, and our role is to promote the rights of older people and adults with disability to live free from abuse in their family, home and community. So when I say family, home and community, what I mean is a person who is living in their family home or living in a community but is unfortunately experiencing or is at risk of abuse from a family member, from a friend, a neighbour, an acquaintance, or somebody that they know. So it's not to do with the conduct of a paid professional that's coming into the home to do paid services, or the conduct of a doctor or a medical professional. It is the person who is an acquaintance, a partner, or a friend who is unfortunately taking advantage of you as an older person or an adult with disability, and we're there to try and prevent and promote their rights to live free from that abuse. What I will go through today very briefly is a bit of an overview as to how we exist within the structure of New South Wales, but more importantly, I want to focus on what would happen if you were to contact us, what we're seeing in terms of the rates of abuse and neglect, and the process of getting information from us, because that's really going to be the most critical part of our information session for you today, is what happens when you call us, what are the types of information points that you could get from us, and how we could potentially help you. So as I said, we're very, very new in the scheme of lots of agencies around. We started on the 1st of July 2019, and really our primary goal is to support older people. So we define that purely by age, and that is somebody over the age of 65 or 50 if they identify as Aboriginal, and an adult with disabilities, so anybody over the age of 18 with a disability, to live free from abuse in their family, home and community. So we do this by having a range of services within our agency. The predominant service that you would engage with at the start is the Ageing and Disability Abuse Helpline, which I'll talk to a little bit later. But we also do things like information sharing with the community, a lot of training and education with workers who might interact with the community within their family, home, or within their community, and also to ensure that reports about abuse are being made into us. But our fundamental cause is around promoting and protecting the rights of older people and adults with disability. We have a lot of functions as well that help to inform the government about what might not be working in relation to services and programs, and we call that systemic reviews. But essentially what that is if there is a system that you are trying to access that is not working to promote your right to live free from abuse, to promote your right to get access to information, we can potentially review what the issue is in that system and provide a report to the New South Wales Parliament about how to overcome that and how to address that more effectively. We also have a really core requirement of raising community awareness. So that is really ensuring that the community know what abuse and neglect can look like. It is a very murky area, it is a very grey area, and we're trying to break through that and provide examples to a lot of people about what abuse can look like, how it can present, how it can be very uncomfortable to talk about it, but to importantly talk about what might be happening to you or somebody that you know in order to make it better in terms of your living situations. And obviously respond to reports about abuse and neglect. I'm going to skim through a little bit of this first section because I do want to get to really the core service need that we provide. As I mentioned, we advise and inform government. For those of you familiar with the way government works, we're an independent government agency. So that means we do have the ability to tell government what's working and what's not working. And we've done that previously in relation to advocacy for people with disability to make that system better for them, and also ongoing reviews in relation to disability access schemes as well. So they're the types of systemic pieces of work that we do. In terms of, sorry, my computer's in a moment. Community engagement. So we have a lot of free resources that you might be able to request from us. Those resources can really be used to have conversations with people that you might be concerned about, or for yourself if you're unclear about what abuse and neglect might be. We have a whole suite of information that we'll share at the end of this talk, but really it's about talking about the issues of abuse and neglect, what it can look like, and how you would get support from the Ageing and Disability Commission. I'm going to just jump into responding to reports because this is going to be the most useful for the information that you're seeing today. So very broadly speaking, anybody can contact us at the Ageing and Disability Abuse Helpline. At the helpline, there are a range of experienced consultants, and they will talk with you about what your concerns might be in relation to abuse or neglect. You can call them anonymously, and you have protections to manage your privacy against the law as well. And the helpline consultants will work through a series of questions with you about what you might be concerned about and what you want to do to change the situation. The helpline consultants will ensure that if you are the person making a report on behalf of somebody else, that if you're not ready to make a report, they will seek information from you and potentially you can refer them to somebody else who can help us in the process of making a report. Or you might want to be seeking information because you're not quite sure, A, what's happening to a person you might be concerned about, or B, what's happening to you. So the helpline is not just about making reports, it's about seeking information, it's about getting support from a trained consultant, and you can be anonymous when you speak with the helpline. Why would you call the helpline? So there may be concerns in relation to financial abuse or exploitation. Neglect, so that could be neglecting to meet adequate healthcare needs, adequate social needs. Neglecting a person from accessing their GP is a form of neglect that we see quite often. So they're the types of reports that often come through. Physical abuse, sexual abuse or exploitation, and psychological abuse. Very serious, very hard topics to be confronted with. It's obviously why we're here today to be talking about these issues, but they are very difficult things to be comprehending, whether it's happening to you or somebody you know. The best piece of advice in terms of what we do encourage the community to do is that if you are simply concerned that somebody that you know has changed, they are withdrawing from their usual social activities, they're noticing it, they're talking to you about things at home aren't quite right, They may have moved back in with their children, their adult children. They may have somebody new caring for them that wasn't in that position before, and things just seem to have changed. They may not have access to their credit cards as freely as they used to be able to. They may not be able to see their family and friends as often. So you may have noticed a real disconnect in the contact that you've had with them. These could be indicators that something is not quite right, and we are here to support you or that person to figure out what's going on and improve those circumstances. So it is a very difficult area, but really what we're here to do is figure out what might be happening for that individual and then improve their safeguards by either establishing some better security points around them or speaking with the person that they're concerned about to improve their lifestyle. So we have three different areas that come to the agency. We firstly have the Ageing and Disability Abuse Helpline. That's really the first port of call when you contact the Ageing and Disability Commission. They would provide advice, information and support. They may make referrals. So for example, if you come to us and your issue is in relation to the conduct of a medical professional, we will then refer you to another agency called the Healthcare Complaints Commission. So it doesn't matter if you find that we can't help you with that matter, we will ensure that you're directed and referred to the most appropriate place to help you out. Depending on what's going on, and most of the reports that we do get are handled by the helpline. They're very trained consultants with social work and psychology backgrounds. But if they find that we can't get through, we can't contact the person, or the matter appears to be unresolvable on the helpline level, we will support the report into what we call the Community Supports Investigations team. That team are made up of, again, social workers and psychologists. They will come out and they will visit the person and talk to them about what they want to do. They may engage in other local support areas. So it might be that the individual doesn't have access to regular meals, and they may establish a food delivery service. So the individual does have access to healthy meals that they need to live their life. So that's really the role of our Community Supports Investigations team. It's to really pick up on what the helpline would not be able to do and ensure that they can go out, see the living circumstances of the individual, and then support them to make decisions to improve their life. The information at the end really is, if we cannot assist you in the matter that you're bringing forward to us, we will refer you to the right agency. It might be in relation to an aged care facility, in which case we will refer you to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. That is their responsibility and that is their remit. We only deal with that family environment, that home environment, but we'll certainly refer you on to those particular places if that's where your matter best sits. This will give you a snapshot as to what is happening in New South Wales at the moment, and it's meant to indicate to you what other people in the community are seeing and what other people in the community are reporting into us as well. Just move this over here a little bit. So the amount of reports that we've received continued to increase year on year. So in the first year of existence, we received about 10,000 calls. In our second year, we received about 13,000 calls. This financial year, we're due to continually increase on that. So that means that people are becoming more aware of us, and they're becoming aware of what's happening in their own neighbourhoods, and that they're reaching out for help. We mainly receive reports about concerns of an older person. So 78% of our reports relate to concerns of some form of abuse about an older person, predominantly women. And we do know that women are more vulnerable across all walks of life in relation to risk factors of abuse. 22% we see are in relation to adults with disability. In terms of the age range for older people, the largest proportion of reports we get are people within the 80 to 84 age group. And there could be a variety of reasons for that. It could be that they are more dependent on others for care and support because they're living in an environment that requires dependency, and so there are issues and concerns of abuse. There is an increase often in frailty as well, so that dependency again increases. And there is some level, unfortunately, of cognitive decline. So 80 to 84, we see the most age groups reported into us. Who is reporting into us when it comes to that particular population? So it's adult children calling us concerned about the conduct of their brother or sister. So they're noticing that their brother or sister is taking over decision-making for mum or dad. They're noticing that they have become a power of attorney without actual due process. and they're making decisions for their parent, not in their best interest. So they could be making financial decisions, selling the family home, selling particular estates, restricting access to money because they're wanting the financial assets for themselves and not making it in the best interests of their parent. So it's adult children calling us concerned about the conduct of another adult child in their environment. They're also calling us in relation to concerns of the conduct of neighbours and partners. So neighbours and partners are quite significant in the reports that we get, and it goes to show that when we're looking at the family environment, we're also looking at the community environment around the individual, where a form of abuse and exploitation can occur. What they're reporting into us predominantly for older people is psychological abuse and financial abuse. So psychological abuse means that they are potentially, for example, accusing the older person that they can't make decisions for themselves anymore. They're making, judgments about their cognitive ability. That then means the older person thinks that they cannot make decisions for themselves. They become then reliant on that individual, and then that subsequently leads into taking over of financial assets, money, credit cards, things like that. So we're mainly seeing allegations against an adult child caused by, or someone else from the family calling us in relation to the conduct of their sibling or their other family member, and it's mainly in relation to financial abuse and psychological abuse. I just want to focus a little bit on, and then we'll basically open up for questions, but there are a range of resources that we can use with anybody in the community that can help to have a conversation with somebody. If you are part of a community group, a council group or a volunteer group, we find that these resources are really helpful to share with your local community about what wellbeing is and what to do to reach out for help. So we have something that's called a My Wellbeing Checklist. It basically goes through some of those indicators that I mentioned before about what is wellbeing, and if none of these are really happening for you or somebody that you know, there could be cause for concern. So some of the questions we ask on the checklist are things like how much money, you know how much money is in your bank account, you have the freedom to see your family and friends, you can attend social activities, your personal care needs are taken care of, and you're treated respectfully from your family and friends. So if somebody is suggesting that that is not happening for them, that could lead to an encouragement to call the helpline, an encouragement to seek support from any of the services here today. But really it's about framing what is a very uncomfortable area to talk about into something a bit more accessible, which is around well-being and knowing what rights you have as an older person in the community. Our helpline number is 1-800-628-221. We're available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We're not a crisis line, so it's important that if there is a state of emergency or a crisis, that the call is made straight to New South Wales Police. So we only operate Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We're not a crisis line. It might be useful to also talk a little bit about, and certainly open to some questions now, just a bit about what happens and the types of questions that the helpline might ask you. The helpline would often ask you if anything has happened before in terms of service intervention. Have you raised the matter with another agency before? They will always speak to the person at the heart of the report. So if you are making a call because you're concerned about a neighbour of yours, the helpline, wherever possible, will always reach out to that neighbour to see what they want to do and to ensure that their will and preference is maintained as much as possible. So we do try and work with the person who is at the heart of the concern that's been raised and ensure that their wishes are being upheld and that we are trying to do as much as possible to safeguard their right into the future to live free from abuse as well. So as I mentioned, our number is 1-800-628-221. We're available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Any concern in relation to abuse or neglect, so financial abuse, psychological abuse, can be made into us. It's not just about making a report, it's also about seeking information, seeking support, and you will speak to a trained professional and a trained consultant at the other end of the line to hopefully figure out what we need to do to improve the circumstances of the person you're concerned about.
Thanks, Carly. Can everybody hear me? I just wanted to say hello. My name is Fiona and I'm one of the mediators with the Let's Talk Elder Mediation and Support Service. And rather like Renee, we started around June 2019, so we're a fairly new service. Just before we start, Relationships Australia acknowledges the traditional owners of this land and waters as well, and wishes to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So the Let's Talk service, which I want to tell you a little bit about today, is, I've just seen my batteries running down, sorry. Sorry, technology. The Let's Talk service is an elder mediation and support service to support older people and their families. We're funded by the New South Wales Family and Domestic Violence Innovation Fund through Women's New South Wales, and we have extended funding now until, at the moment, June next year. We aim to mitigate the risk of and respond early to elder abuse, which is why we wanted to speak with you today. And Let's Talk is delivered by trained counsellors and mediators from Relationships Australia. We have extensive training in this particular area because it is a new area of elder mediation and elder law. There's always been elder law, but there's much more focus now, as we're an ageing population, in the rights and needs of older people. So what we're able to do is we really work in we're not a legal service. We work in, as Relationships Australia has always done, in the area of families. So the idea is that we will provide a safe and a structured and supportive environment for older people and their families and carers to address issues of concern. And that can include future planning. That can include things like getting older and things that people need to consider. And sometimes it's also ill health or dementia, things that can impact families. So it allows families to come together to talk about these sorts of issues of concern and work towards better future outcomes for the family, but also for the older people in the family. We can provide assessment and targeted referrals because we feel it's really important with older people to give you information and referrals that are going to be really useful to you so that you're not going around the houses trying to find someone to support you, that you know exactly where you're going. And often our referrals are warm referrals. So with your permission, we might actually access a service for you and put you in touch so that you can go straight to them and you know you're going to get the kind of information that you need. And our guiding principle is that the rights of older people are upheld and their wishes are understood and their voices heard. Because sometimes within a family, as we get older, we can be slightly drowned out, we can be ignored, people can decide what they think is better for us. And we really feel that that's not okay. And we support older people to be able to have their voices heard in any kind of discussion about things that will impact them or decisions that are about them, so that they're included in all decision making and are at the forefront of that decision making, that things are not happening to you that you're not involved with. So as Renee said, she talked through elder abuse, and as you can see here, there are different forms, but it can be defined as a single or repeated act or a lack of appropriate action, which would include neglect, which occurs within any relationship where there's an expectation of trust, which is going to cause harm or distress to an older person. And the abuses that we probably hear of most in our service is financial and psychological and emotional abuse. And I think that's because, in a way, those are the easier, it's not easy, but the easier ones to talk about, because we know about those and we hear about those. Because as Renee said, talking about elder abuse is actually really difficult. And there are lots of reasons why it's really difficult to talk about things that are happening to you. And what we find with older people is that there are real barriers to reporting, to actually saying, this is happening to me. Sometimes it's because we don't actually see what's happening to us as abuse. For example, with our children, often they will ask for support and we're happy to give it. But sometimes those requests for support can be constant. So for example, we might have an adult child who constantly is asking for financial support, that might need weekly assistance. And that might be fine, but it also might not be so fine when it's impacting our own ability to care for ourselves financially. So it's really seeing that as some of these requests as actually taking advantage. And sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. And it's very difficult to work out sometimes what's going on. And sometimes that's why we get calls from other family members who might be concerned that somebody is taking advantage of a parent or an older person, or it might be a carer who's just not quite sure. And so they might contact our service to start a process of having those discussions to try and find out what's happening. Often people don't say anything because they're dependent on the person who's actually abusing them. So they might be dependent on them because they love them and they want to keep that relationship going. They might need to be living with them. They might need accommodation. They might need care. So it's, again, difficult for them to say what's happening to them. More often than not, the person who's being hurt or abused actually loves the person who's doing this to them. We know that it's most common for somebody abusing an older person to be their adult children, their sons or their daughters. And so often older people don't want to lose that relationship. They don't want the abuse to continue, but on the other hand, they don't want to get the person who's doing these things to them into trouble. And we understand that. It's a really difficult situation. And it's very hard for us to acknowledge sometimes that people that we love are actually taking advantage of us. That's a really hard thing to say and to talk about, and also to talk about within a family, with other family members. And so we find that often holds people back from saying what they want to say. Sometimes there's a fear of punishment or retaliation if you say anything. Sometimes there are threats that you can't live here anymore if you speak out, that you might go into care. Those sorts of threats we hear sometimes. Sometimes people are just unaware of their options or their rights. They don't know who to call or who to ask about what's happening to them. And there's also sometimes a fear of not being believed. Again, because it's a difficult thing to talk about. Other things that can impact are slightly different. Sometimes if people are very isolated, if older people are living on their own or they live a long distance from their families or friends, they can be isolated, and this can actually put them at risk of abuse because they don't have many people coming into the home to just have some eyes and ears on what's happening. Sometimes within families, there are intergenerational difficulties and conflicts. There can be, domestic or family violence, conflicts over time, mental health or substance abuse issues that really complicate situations when people want to come forward and talk about abuses in the family. Sometimes it's difficult actually to reach out because you don't speak the language, or there are cultural norms that might be holding you back from reporting and making it difficult for you to speak out. And also sometimes people can actually be impaired in their ability to speak out due to either diminished capacity or having a disability that makes it impossible for them to actually say what's happening to them. So there are lots of reasons, and we see lots of different reasons why people find it difficult to talk about what's happening to them. And sometimes within families, it needs a group approach, because sometimes things are happening to older people because members of their families are really struggling. They might be suffering from carer stress. They might be part of what I think people now call the sandwich generation. They're looking after their own adult children. They might be looking after grandchildren, and they might also be looking after and caring for an older person who needs some real help. And so people can be under an awful lot of strain, which causes difficulties. And sometimes it's hard to acknowledge that, to say, look, I'm really struggling here. And so within the service that we provide, people are able to sit down and quietly talk through their own issues with a mediator. And when the family comes together, there's some kind of clarity of the stresses that everybody's under that can be discussed and ways worked out within a family of how better to support each other. There are obviously decision-making documents and services that can assist to avoid, if you can, any kind of potential for abuse to happen. So we really advise people to get legal and financial advice. There are decision-making documents. Renee's already talked about those things like powers of attorney that look after your finances. So that's to do with your finances, and you can nominate somebody to assist you and also to take over if you at any stage you lose the capacity to look after your own affairs. Guardianship looks after things like your lifestyle choices, your accommodation, your medical appointments, or maybe your dental appointments. So again, it's somebody that you trust, who you feel really knows you well, and if you weren't able to make those decisions for yourself, could step in for you. Things like advanced care directives allow the medical profession, if need be, to understand what you really want moving forward and what would be supportive for you in terms of your care. What makes you happy? What do you need? And wills are wills. We all understand those, and often those are the document. The will is the document that gets done, and some of these other documents don't. But they're useful. But it's really important, if you're going to do these documents, to understand what they actually are all about and the responsibilities that they carry, because they're all different, and to discuss with your family who you want to appoint. Sometimes that in itself can cause conflict, with some family members thinking that they would be better handling these issues than others. And so it's really good to have a family discussion and to get advice about it, and to choose your family members through talking to them carefully, understanding what they're good at and what they might not be very good at. I'm not very good at finances, so I wouldn't be the best person to be a power of attorney, but I know a lot more about care and things like that. So guardianship might be, in my family, something that I would be better at, whereas my brother, who's very good at financial affairs, might be a better power of attorney and might understand those issues much more. So it's understanding, what you're asking people to do, for them to understand as well. And also, once you've made those choices, to understand you can change your mind and you can change your decisions, because sometimes circumstances change. So you might ask your daughter's husband to help you with your financial affairs and put him down as a nominee. And then if they become separated, and he's not as involved with you as he was before, he may not be the right choice anymore. So we understand that circumstances change, and you should be aware that you can make changes to any documents at any stage, as long as you have the capacity to do so. We also suggest that if older people are going to go into any transaction with family members, such as developing a granny flat to move into, or moving into your adult child's home, because it makes sense and they can care for you and you can help them out perhaps with care for the kids or your grandchildren, or vice versa if adult family members move back into the parental home. It's really good to talk these things through. Think about what's going to go right, but also maybe consider what might happen, what might go wrong. And if you can document these things, it's really good to get advice and just to get down the basics of what you're each expecting out of that relationship and out of that transaction, and put it in writing, because that again can cause a lot of problems if that's not done. And that's often some of the disagreements in families that we see, where, for example, sometimes perhaps an adult child after a separation might move back to the parental home, and it's a short-term relocation, and everyone understands it as that. And 3 or 4 years down the track, that adult child is still there, and it's becoming an issue. So it's really good to get back to nut through what might go wrong, what might go right, and put it in writing. And another thing we suggest to people is, even if you don't think you're ever going to need any care at home, it's quite good to actually get your head around what the options are, what My Aged Care provides, what care providers do. Some of them charge differently, some of them offer different sorts of services. To understanding that system and being informed is a really, really good thing to do, and also to make your wishes known. So the kinds of things we're talking about are your values and the things that make you happy and the things that make you unhappy, so that everybody understands if they are suddenly needing to look after you or provide care, that they really understand you as a person and what you want and what you don't want. But if you're in a situation, as Renee said, where things are not working, where you feel that you're at risk for any reason, there are lots of services that you can engage that can help you. And also, if you're a family member, as Renee said, that's concerned, you can get a lot of information from the public guardian and trustee. There are also services such as ours, which are relational services that can bring families together to have conversations to mitigate any kind of harm. There are also obviously legal and financial and medical services. Your GP is a great resource. There's the elder abuse helpline that Renee was talking about. And also, if you're really desperate, that there are crisis services such as the police. The police now have specific police officers that will look after the rights and needs of older people. And at hospitals, there are the social workers there who will also assist. So there's really no wrong door. If you reach out, there will be someone there to help. So where we fit in finally is we're here to assist people. We're a free service to have confidential, but sometimes challenging and difficult conversations around future planning, around any kind of conflict or estrangement that families want to discuss that revolve around or include an older person. And meetings can be individual. They can include mediation and facilitated family meetings. And we also provide counselling support, which can either be individual or family therapy. We assist people to plan for the future, and that can include medical arrangements. Sometimes people have got a diagnosis which is going to affect the future for them, such as a dementia diagnosis or an illness. Address disagreements and make decisions. So we don't make decisions for people, we allow the family to come together to work on decisions and solutions that protect the rights and the safety of an older person. And as I said before, we make referrals which are targeted and often warm referrals. So our agreements are goodwill only. We're not a legal service. So it really relies on the families themselves to come up with solutions that they feel will work and that they'd like to adhere to. And we work with translators often and can include, sometimes can work in your own language, which would be Mandarin or Chinese if you speak Chinese. But we also have other workers who speak different languages, so we can provide sometimes a full service in your language. So this PowerPoint, I think, will be made available. So we've put up some general links to websites that might be useful to you. And just to say, there is no wrong door. If you need any assistance, all our services link together. And if we're not the right services, we will refer to a service that is the right service, and vice versa for other services that we work with. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Jared Dunlop, and I am an advocate and educator with Seniors' Rights Service. But I'll just start by acknowledging the Bundjalung people, who are the traditional custodians of the land where I'm sitting on the far north coast of New South Wales. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I'll just extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Jill.
Thanks, Jared. Hi, everyone. My name's Jill McDonald, and I'm also an advocate and education officer with Seniors' Rights Service. And I'd like to do the same thing. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Biripi people, the traditional custodians of the land where I live and work on the Mid-North Coast. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and I extend my respect also to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person who's here today with us. Thank you.
So next slide, Harley. Okay, so I'm just going to show you this disclaimer because the information that we give you today is not legal advice, and it's not intended to replace legal advice. For legal advice, you need to consult one of our solicitors, and I'll tell you how to do that later on. Okay, next slide, Carly. Jill.
Okay, now Seniors Rights Service, and Fiona has referred to us during her presentation as well. We're a statewide service as well. We're a free and confidential service. We're a community organisation. We're not a government agency like the Commission is, but we're a community organisation. And our three main services are what you can see here: legal services, aged care advocacy and support, and education services. Our legal services, which is really important for the presentation today, are that our team of solicitors give legal advice to any person over the age of 65, or if you're an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person, over the age of 50. We do not give legal advice to grandchildren or sons or daughters. We give legal advice to the older person. If the older person has a power of attorney, an enduring power of attorney or enduring guardian, then that person is a legal representative of the older person. So our solicitors would give legal advice to enduring power of attorneys, enduring guardians, with proof of that documentation. So I'll talk a little bit more about legal services shortly. Now, Jared and I, as we said, we are advocates and education officers. We are advocates for any person receiving aged care services through My Aged Care, through residential aged care, but also we get lots of calls from family members. We get calls from individuals who are not receiving aged care services but are looking into it. So it's anything to do with aged care services. Now, our third service is our education service, and we go out to lots of community organisations, just as we're doing today, talking with you through Bayside Council. Lots of community organisations, lots of probus groups. We talk to seniors groups, and importantly, we also talk to residents and staff in aged care homes to talk about residents' rights. And we talk to home care providers and people receiving home care services as well. So anything to do with aged care. And it's really important that what we do is protect and advance the rights of older people, particularly vulnerable and disadvantaged groups. They're the groups of people that we want to support. Okay. So our legal service, our team of solicitors are a general legal service. And as I said to you before, they give advice to people over the age of 65 or for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people over the age of 50. The sorts of legal advice that we give is mainly around consumer issues, anything to do with being a consumer. We also have a solicitor who's specialises in retirement village legislation. If you're a resident in a retirement village and you're looking for legal advice, also we have a solicitor specialising in strata legislation. If you're an older person living in strata accommodation and you have a legal question for our solicitors. Any human rights matters our solicitors deal with, and also, importantly, alternative decision making. And Jared's going to talk in a little bit more detail about that a bit later on. The areas where we don't give legal advice, and it's very important that people know that we don't give legal advice on criminal charges, we don't give legal advice on commercial matters or business disputes, or conveyancing, any of those sorts of things. Our solicitors will help to refer you to a private solicitor for those sorts of legal advice. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about aged care advocacy. So Jill and I are both aged care advocates. And what an advocate does is an advocate will listen to your concerns or your problems with the aged care service you're receiving. So that could be Commonwealth Home Support Programme, it could be on a home care package, or you might be in residential care. So the first thing we do is we listen to you. So then we tell you what your rights are under the Charter of Aged Care Rights, and we inform you of what care and services you're entitled to receive under the Aged Care Quality Standards. And we'll also refer to the Aged Care Act. So we will help you clarify the issue. We'll give you all the information you need, and we'll discuss your options. And then hopefully you'll be able to make an informed decision about how you'd like to proceed. I mean, sometimes we find that an older person might make a decision which other people think is a really bad or a really poor decision. But it's not our job to express our views on the decisions they make. It's our job just to inform them of their rights under the Charter of Aged Care Rights, speak on their behalf if that's what they want, and to represent them as accurately as possible. So we might speak to the manager of the aged care facility if that's what the person wants, or we might speak to the home care provider. There was a man earlier who had a question about home care. So if you have problems with your home care provider, you can call us, tell us what your problems are. We, as I said before, we'll tell you what your rights are under the Charter and what care and services you're entitled to receive. And if you want us to, we can call the home care provider on your behalf. So the thing about that's called individual advocacy. And sometimes the person really just needs the right information and they're happy to speak up for themselves once they have that information. And that's called self-advocacy, which is really the most powerful form of advocacy. So we can support you to speak on yourself. The thing about an advocate is we're not mediators, we're not counselors, we're not social workers, and we're not case workers. So the difference between us and a mediator is we do take sides. We're partisan. We're on your side and no one else's. So when we speak to the home care provider, the aged care provider, we're on your side and nobody else's. So advocacy organizations, including Seniors' Rights Service, we report to the Older Persons Advocacy Network. And the Older Persons Advocacy Network lobbies and engage with elected representatives and policymakers to directly influence the outcome of aged care policy. And that's called systemic advocacy. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to show you this video, which is an explainer video on the Charter of Aged Care Rights. So we'll have a look at that. Carly, thank you. Oh no, it's what is advocacy? Thanks, Carly. So, Jill?
Yes, I think I might go quickly over this slide because I think you've covered a lot of this, Jared, previously.
Yeah.
But just to reiterate what Jared has been saying, that we listen, the most important thing is we listen to your concerns. Today we're doing lots of talking, but certainly when we're talking to an elderly person, a person receiving services, or just any elderly person, listening is most important. If it's to do with your aged care services, we discuss your rights as featured on the Charter of Aged Care Rights, and we clarify with you what are the issues that you're concerned about. Is it to do with your care at your care service? Is it to do with this actual service that you're receiving? Care and that's being provided. Are you not being provided with the right equipment? Are staff not coming and providing the service that you agreed to in your care agreement? Or is someone ringing up about abuse of a person? And we certainly get calls about abuse of elderly people, abuse of people in abuse happening in aged care homes as well. So we do work together with the Commission, and we do work together with Relationships Australia in these sorts of situations. The next important thing that once we've clarified what the issue is about and whether we're going to provide the advocacy service, what we try to do is empower people to self-advocate. Self-advocacy is really important for you to have the confidence to speak up with your aged care provider, to speak up with your care manager and express your concerns yourself. If you don't feel confident to do that, and certainly lots of people do, particularly when we get calls from adult children, sons and daughters or grandchildren who are speaking up on behalf of a parent receiving aged care services, we certainly encourage people to self-advocate. But if you don't have the confidence or you would like us to speak on your behalf, we need to get your permission. Sometimes people don't give us permission. So that means that we step back, we let the person think about it and ask them to contact us again if they feel that they would like us to speak on their behalf. And when we do that, we contact the care manager. The care manager is, the most senior person is the one for us to contact and raise your concerns. If we feel that the issue is something that's not just something that we can work on together and work through as discussion with the care manager, you may be wanting to make a formal complaint. And as Renee has mentioned, the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission is where you go to make a formal complaint if you feel that the situation is much more serious. And that it's not really an advocacy situation, but it's a formal complaint about your care or services. We also can refer you to another group of people, a couple of people who work for Seniors' Rights Service, but some other people who are called navigators. Navigators are people who assist when you're starting that journey through My Aged Care and you don't know. It's a very complex journey and it can be very difficult, particularly for elderly, frail people. So the people who are navigators help you through that. They will talk with you to My Aged Care and help you get your care established. The other important people in this area of aged care, and I think Fiona made mention of them, is that at Centrelink now have what's called aged care specialist officers. These positions are quite new in the last several months. They're quite different to financial information service officers. They specifically assist people on their aged care journey in the really complex area of your financial status and your financial needs. The aged care specialist officers are really important in this area as well. I'll give you their number. It's 1800 227 475. And you need to make an appointment with that person, and you need to make a face-to-face appointment to discuss your financial needs. around aged care. Okay, I think that's probably enough from me for the moment.
So we often get phone calls from the adult sons or daughters of people who are receiving aged care services. So they might be calling because they have a complaint about the services their parents are receiving. However, we cannot advocate on their behalf. We always ask them to get the older person to phone us themselves, because we cannot speak on behalf of an adult son or daughter unless they are the enduring guardian or enduring power of attorney of the older person, in which case we can phone the provider on their behalf. We also get calls from service providers who ask us to speak on behalf of the older person. And again, we cannot act on the instructions of service providers. We have to ask them to either get the older person or their enduring guardian to call on their own behalf. Okay, so next slide. So Charter of Aged Care Rights. Do we have a video on the Charter of Aged Care Rights? We do.
Yes,
Okay,
we do.
that's great. Okay.
Hi, Jared. I noticed that this video goes for 6 minutes.
Oh, it's a bit long. Okay, you started about 18 seconds, and then I'll just tell you when to finish. How does that
okay.
sound?
We'll just start it here, and you can tell me when to pause
Okay.
it.
Okay.
From the 1st of July 2019, the Australian Government is introducing a new and simpler Charter of Aged Care Rights for those you provide services to, regardless of the type of aged care they receive. The people you provide services to still have the same legal rights as all Australians. The Charter of Aged Care Rights add to these and are designed to help put the focus on the consumer, giving them choice and making sure they are treated with respect. This video aims to help you understand their rights and what your obligations are as a provider of aged care services receiving funding from the Australian Government. Let's go through all 14 of the new rights of those you provide services for. They have the right to safe and high-quality care and services. They have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. They have the right to have their identity, culture, and diversity valued and supported. They have the right to live without abuse and neglect. They have the right to be informed about their care and services in a way they understand. And they have the right to have access to information about themselves, including information about their rights, care, and services. They have the right to have control over and make choices about their care, personal and social life, including where choices involve personal risk. They have the right to have control over and to make decisions about the personal aspects of their daily life, financial affairs, and possessions. They have the right to their independence. They have the right to be listened to and understood. They have the right to have a person of their choice, including an aged care advocate, support them or speak on their behalf. They have the right to complain, free from reprisal, and to have their complaints dealt with fairly and promptly. They have the right to personal privacy and to have their personal information protected. And finally, they have the right to exercise their rights without it adversely affecting the way they are treated.
Thanks, Carly. That's probably enough. So, as a human rights-based organisation, the Charter of Aged Care Rights underpins everything we do. So everyone who commences aged care services are asked to sign a copy of the Charter of Aged Care Rights. But they're not usually given a copy. That copy that they've signed is put in a file for auditors to see. So we try to make sure that everyone who's receiving aged care services actually have a copy of the Charter of Aged Care Rights. And my advice to anyone working with people who receive Commonwealth funded aged care services is to empower them by giving them a copy of the Charter. Jill?
Yes, and along with the Charter of Rights, and you can, the little picture that you got there is actually the front cover of a little booklet that you can get, which discusses the Charter of Aged Care Rights. But we also understand that along with rights come responsibilities, and we would suggest that out of the Charter of Aged Care Rights there is respect for each other, that we all live and work in a safe environment, that we have open and transparent information that's shared between us all, and that most importantly for people receiving aged care services, that you understand the fees that are being charged, because all organisations charge different fees, that you understand the fees and that you understand your responsibility to pay your fees. Okay.
Okay,
Jared.
so yeah, this is the aged care quality standards. So it's part of our job to make sure that aged care providers adhere to the aged care quality standards. And you can see that number one in the standards is consumer dignity and choice. So number one is the foundation standard, and that's about fostering social inclusion, health and well-being, and it reflects 7 important concepts, which are dignity and respect, identity, culture and diversity, cultural safety, choice, dignity of risk, and information and personal privacy. So that is the foundation standard, number one. And we refer to the standards when we are talking to aged care providers and ensuring that people are receiving the care that they're entitled to receive. Okay, I think there's one more slide. So the best way for people to stay on control of their affairs as they get older is to plan for the future. And I know Fiona mentioned this in her presentation, but basically there's 4 things you need. We all know what a will is, and that allows you to stay in control of what happens to your possessions and your assets after you die. We also recommend that people have an enduring power of attorney. So you can only appoint an enduring power of attorney while you have the capacity to do that. And then your enduring power of attorney only comes into effect if you lose capacity to make your own decisions. So your enduring power of attorney will look after your finances after you lose capacity to make those financial decisions for yourself. And then you need an enduring guardian, which again, you can only appoint while you have the capacity to do that. An enduring guardianship comes into effect after you lose capacity. So your enduring guardian will make decisions about where you live, what services you receive, and what health care you receive. And finally, you also need an advanced care directive. So an advanced care directive, you can let people know what sort of care you want to receive when you're approaching the end of your life. For example, if you reach the age of 98 and you have a heart attack, do you want to be resuscitated? So you can let that be known in your advanced care directive. And the New South Wales Supreme Court has said that valid advanced care directives must be followed because they're part of a person's right to make decisions about their health. And if an advanced care directive is valid, it must be followed. So even health professionals and personnel responsible have no authority to override a valid advanced care directive. So if you want to discuss things like wills, enduring power of attorney, enduring guardian, and advanced care directives, you can give us a call on 1-800-424-079. We're happy to discuss that with you, as well as Charter of Aged Care Rights and aged care quality standards. Okay, thank you, Carly.